Disclaimer. This podcast features a conversation between two individuals regarding assistive technology. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed during this episode belong solely to the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of their respective employers. Furthermore, this discussion is for informational purposes only.
Hi, and welcome to Assistive Technology Today. I'm your host, Vinny L. I'm an assistive technology specialist. I work for enabling devices, and I have done so for the past 24 years. Today, we have a special guest, Katie Seaver. She's an SLP, and she works for she's a co-founder of the Babel Group. And we will turn it over to Katie and welcome her to the podcast. And like Katie, tell us a little bit about herself and what the Babel Group does and what she does there. So Katie, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me here, Vinny. Yeah, as you said, I'm a speech language pathologist. I through my journey in my career ended up specializing in AAC, so alternative augmentative communication. And the real reason is I feel that speech language pathologists are in a space often of taking things away, meaning someone's swallowing has changed and we have to put them on, they can't have salad or soup and they're going to have pureed solids. And it's just a bad news journey. Grandma fell and has a change in cognition and really shouldn't manage her meds or her checkbook, or maybe even isn't safe at home anymore. I was just felt like I was taking all the time. And as much as I appreciated that counseling position that I was in, when it came to AAC, I felt like it was like a gift. I was opening doors. I was giving this incredible gift to somebody, and empowering them in a way that was a new direction that felt really good. Every time I unlocked what that struggle was that they were having and found a solution to communication, that felt really good. So I leaned into that space, specializing mostly with folks living with degenerative diseases. So ALS, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, and some strokes, but acquired communication changes and what that journey looked like. So I am the now founder of a company called the Babel Group, and that's Babel, of the Tower of Babel. If anyone wants to sort of look up that journey, it's communication based in its story. So I really the business had previous owner, my co-founder Rachel Levy, and I really enjoyed the story and learning about the Tower of Babel. And we are two SLPs that are seeking innovation in our field, either for our clients or for our fellow clinicians. We are in a renaissance of innovation. With AI, everyone can innovate and make their ideas a reality. But what does it look like? And do we need to step in as domain experts and make sure it's really fitting the needs of either ourselves or our clients?
Right.
And then also we resell these products once they're in the market. So it's been a really fun company space to be in, of continuing just pushing innovation. As an AAC provider, I was offering very similar tools for 20 years. So I'm excited to see that it's changes on this horizon right now. There's so much being offered to our field.
Right. I was, some of my other guests that I've spoken with on the podcast, we talk about how the technology has grown over the years. Every year we get some innovation, but like I always mention the iPad because that was like a big thing when that came out back in like 2010 roughly. And it was always, it was great and it opened doors and it gave people a different way to access communication, something familiar for not just for clinicians, but allowing, AAC to come into the home where family members may already have an iPad so they're not so afraid of it. That's always the technology fear, the fear of the unknown, like new devices. Oh, I don't know how to use this. They're not going to be willing to use it. So it was very familiar. But it was still slow and steady. Every year we were building upon it and everything, which was great. But now, like you said, with some of the the new stuff that's out, with AI and everything that, the technology jump has been exponential. I'd say it's much more rapid and it's only getting better and better.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope the better part is reality. I think the entrepreneur journey of my fellow clinicians has been exciting to see in the last couple of years, where people can have an idea and use AI to launch an app onto an iPad and into the Apple Store. Um, and we are these subject matter experts. We know the human experience related to either receiving speech therapy or using a communication aid. Um, really well. So it requires our expertise to build these well. I think there will be an area of, you know, overflow, and I think they're calling it like sludge. There will be excessive app environments that aren't quite the right fit, but those will get weeded out, and it's going to take some thoughtfulness as we select the right tools for ourselves or our clients. And that's kind of what Rachel and I are navigating is it are they being thoughtful in what they're launching,
Right.
and can we get behind it and sort of vet some of these tools that are out there?
Right. So you're saying, there's a lot of quantity out there, especially because like you said, almost anybody, if you have an idea, can use some of these pretty interesting AI tools to generate apps and stuff, but are they really quality apps and are really addressing the needs of the end user? So I agree with you. There's a lot of things I see out in AI that I don't agree with and I think is kind of an annoyance. But, unfortunately, this is part of the growing pains, I guess. With technology, there's always going to be a learning curve and there's always going to be, growing pains. So hopefully, like you said, um, we'll focus in on that and get more clarified and people, like you said, a lot of the stuff that's not good is going to get weeded out and people will realize, another reason why doing the podcast is I wanted to have a voice for assistive technology to bring awareness to what's out there, the latest innovations, and people like yourself who have been in the field for many years to kind of help people sort through that kind of muddy water, so to speak, to get some clarity.
I think that's a big piece of our field. Is there's a lot of therapists and clinicians that are, shall we say, like boots on the ground. They're serving a large population of pediatric or adults, and are doing the day to day. And I find that they're similar to maybe the other medical fields, where there are these general providers that then need to call in the experts. And the divide of knowledge, at least in our field, I'm finding the divide of knowledge that is from these general practitioners to the expert assistive technology providers there's such a vast knowledge gap between the two. And I would love to see that shrink a little bit somehow. An example is I often have phone calls with people at the Babel Group who are looking for technology solutions. And I say, have you tried a no tech? Have you tried a piece of paper? Recently, I had somebody that was a user of one of the products, and I said, have you thought about giving someone a business card that explains your communication breakdown and explains that you can understand everything, though?
Right.
And he was like, this has changed my life.
Hmm.
And he's been in 20 years of speech therapy. And sometimes it's these little no tech solutions
Right.
that, we love our laminators. Just give someone a piece of
Right.
paper to help that listener communicate with them.
S-
And it doesn't have to be this expert person that comes in every time. We just need to think outside of
The
standard
box. Yeah.
solutions, or break down that human experience of what does it mean for a speaker and a listener to engage, and how can we improve that interaction.
Right.
And so whether it's a no tech piece of paper or a voice amplifier or something relatively high tech and take some technical expertise on a piece of hardware, there's a
Right.
lot to explore. And I hope within this podcast that the general providers feel empowered to problem solve.
Right. I mean, it's the old saying, sometimes old school is best, and or you don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's like you said, sometimes like I deal with this a lot. I have, on the hardware side more, in my position as a AT consultant for my company. Like you said, sometimes people will be looking like beyond the stars, and I'm like, you don't really, well, did you try, like you said, try this, like something simple. And it's like, it's almost like they have an epiphany or a revelation that, wow, it's only that simple. I had a person the other day, they had a user that was using one of our gumball switches, and they said this person has a saliva problem and they need a waterproof switch. And I said, I really don't technically have a waterproof switch. I said, what are they using now? And they're using this gumball switch. And I said, I have this head switch that's a little bit better. I said, but to be honest with you, I said, is the gumball switch working for them? And they said, yes. That's the most important thing, is what they can do, not what they can't do. I said, well, here's a novel idea. I said, why don't you just try putting the gumball switch in a heavy duty Ziploc freezer bag and zip it up? I said, it's going to be waterproof unless you put it in the tub. I said, and when it gets soiled, you don't have to worry about trying to clean it. You just throw the Ziploc bag away. You put a new one on. It's safe for them to touch because it's food grade plastic. I said, and they're like, oh, wow, I never thought of that. I was like, just think outside of the box. Or we had talked about this too. Sometimes people wrap things in cellophane or press and seal. You know, you have to think outside the box in this industry. And like you said, sometimes don't overcomplicate it. But again, if somebody needs the technology, it's there. And like you said, that's when you call in the experts or, people like yourself that can help dissect or basically make sense of all this and kind of solidify it and say, okay, you really need this, or you could get away with doing something light tech that you don't need to be that involved.
Yeah, I love the press and seal new, cellophane products. But I think even if hopefully people have access to a team, but even just putting two heads together and say, can
Hmm.
we just talk out loud about what this, client of mine is struggling with, and what might be the most obvious solution to us as people that don't know the entire AT space, and
Right.
the press and seal
Right.
cellophane to the Ziploc bag to a piece of paper. Can we laminate it?
Right.
Those are all probably at every workplace that we work in.
That's why, with that said, I like when people ask me, they like, do you work with a therapist? Like, if you get an SLP and an OT together,
Yes.
they basically, these are your reinforcements. They look at things with different eyes, but very similar, and they can both, if they're on the same path, or the same page, they'll figure something out together and say, hey, let's try this. They know, they're different fields, but they're not. You all like PT, OT, SLPs, you kind of meld into this field. Everybody needs to know a little bit about each other's field to basically serve the client or the patient properly. And it's always great because I've had some pretty complex situations where I said, you know what, you need to sit down with your OT and your SLP, and they'll basically help you come up with a solution to navigate what you need.
Those are really fun conversations, things
Yeah,
that can come of them. And the other thing I can't say enough about is that every state has an assistive technology lending library. So looking up your local ATAP library, I know rural areas don't always, it's not always like in
right.
your backyard, but in most cities, it'll be, in Massachusetts, there were two in the state, which is quite a small state. So look those up, and you can go and touch and feel and talk to people that spend a lot of time in that space. That's where I got most familiar with what you create too, is they
Mhm.
have a lot of the switches and the cause and effect train,
Toys and things.
toys, I guess. I didn't
Yeah.
want to call them toys, but
Yep.
interactions
We
that
call them
people can
now therapeutic learning devices, but
pair.
children and early learners will learn through play. That's how we learn,
Exactly.
So
But there's also a lot related to like uh med management, thinking through like the no tech to high tech solutions. There's a lot
Hmm.
out there
Oh yeah.
in those spaces. And Googling something can put you into the strangest rabbit holes that don't help. So these
Mhm.
libraries are a great place to call and have these, like, can we just chat about the problem I'm having with this
Right,
person
right.
and see what they can come up with?
Yeah, because usually, these libraries are run by very knowledgeable people who are
Mhm.
either they might be a retired SLP or an OT, or they may be continuing, but they run the library. We had a funny story. Enabling devices has been around since 1976, and it started out as toys for special children because the founder, Dr. Stephen Kaner, was a biomechanical engineer. One of the first uh, devices he made. He went to United Cerebral Palsy out in Long Island, and he was looking to maybe work for them. And there was a kid sitting in a wheelchair, and he was slumped over. And he went to the therapist, and he said, "Well, where are the toys?" And she said, "There are no toys. He has CP." And this is going back 50 years ago. So things are different, obviously, thank God. And he said, "Well, that's crazy because we can put a man on the moon. We don't have a toy for this kid to play." So his dad was a model HO train set. He used to make all the buildings for the scale models. So he had a workshop. So he went home and he took a little Lionel train set. And the first thing he did was he put a mercury switch, which we don't use anymore. He made it like a tilt switch, and he basically wired it up so that when the kid would lift his head up, the train set would go around. So
Love
that was
it.
the first cause and effect toy that he made. So that was amazing. He brought it out there. It changed the child's life that, they were basically engaged now. They could communicate with the world around them and engage. So, you know, this stuff like this is, it's just amazing that, these things transpire how they do. And it's just, it we didn't. Oh, so with that said, with that story, what I was trying to get to is when back then there really wasn't really any lending libraries back when the
Hmm.
company started. It was pretty much assistive tech was kind of, I think, more just people made up things on their own to just try and do what they could. Dr. Kaner had a bus, a lending kind of a lending library, mobile lending library. It was a Mercedes bus, and he used
Amazing.
to
Like a
drive.
Sprinter van.
Yeah, and he used to drive around the local areas and have all this stuff that he made and basically went to centers and said, "Here, come on the bus, see what you need, take some stuff, borrow it for a while and bring it back." So he had, I don't know, he might have been the first guy to have a mobile lending library going
Probably.
back, 1976. So, and we joke about that. I said, his son is the CEO now. He says, remember when my dad had that Sprinter Mercedes and he used to drive around, dropping off toys and things.
It's still, I mean, I would love that. Living in Vermont, I think, in a rural community, that wouldn't it be nice to have, just I'm sure it opened the possibilities in so many minds of people that hadn't considered any of this, from cause and effect to, dynamic now video game
Right.
consoles.
Oh yeah, right.
That it just, I worked with so many folks that were living with muscular dystrophy in my career, and the gaming community that they live within is amazingly accessible
Mm.
now. So I
Yeah.
love to see where all of this is going. And my career pivot, it shifted because I was working in the Chelsea Leonard Florence Center in Chelsea, Massachusetts, and for folks that were living with ALS and MS, but they were so young. And it's the Center for Living is what
Right.
the name is. And because we didn't have a lot of offerings, we were bringing in university teams to try to solve the problems my clients were having. So UMass Lowell and MIT and
Mhm.
all of these great resources that were in our community were coming in and doing sprint. Sorry. Can you hear my dog barking? That's just
No,
really,
no, it's
it's
fine.
so loud. Good. The noise cancellation's working.
Does work.
The universities came in to solve and have these design sprints and execute a problem, and solve the problem of my clients. And we that's sort of where eventually I ended up working for outside companies. So as the domain expert, I said, you can hire me. I can come in and be your subject matter expert. We can take this to market. Or, you know what, your market that you're solving for is not accessible to my clients at all. So let's, work together and collaborate as a subject matter expert and talk about how might you make your product accessible.
Mhm.
And so that's where I, in 2019, started stepping out of my clinic role.
Right.
Um, in COVID with my family management, I had to step out of the clinic entirely. And we actually moved out of state. So that's an unusual path, but
Mhm.
I ended up full-time consulting in that subject matter expertise. And we can talk more about what that was because I'm still very passionate about that.
Yeah, sure. I'd like to, share that with the listener. Sure.
Yeah. So the opportunity came up with Google to try to make their speech recognition accessible. So as you know, the Google Home devices or even anything on Android or anything on Chrome is accessible to your voice, yours and mine,
Right.
but not our clients' speech. So they needed a subject matter expert to help unpack what does it look like to make it accessible for people that have non-standard speech. They had zero data.
Right.
The Ice Bucket Challenge allowed the ALS Therapy Development Institute to collect enough speech samples that they were able to get Google interested. They're like, okay, the Ice Bucket Challenge now has created enough speech samples so we can look at what is the problem. And we need samples to make AI work.
Sure.
You have to have data. At the same time, Voice It was entering the space, starting from scratch and saying, we need samples of people that have non-standard speech in order to make speech recognition work. And so that continues. The out of the box, you open your Alexa out of the box, it is thousands of hours of speech samples from people like you and me, and zero samples from people that sound like our clients.
Right.
So so the Project Relate in Google, we published 12 articles of research on what this actually looks like and where the problem is. How badly do these platforms actually perform for our clients? That was a problem people didn't know existed. So really fun. I enjoyed being around the brains that are part of the Google experience. They are so smart, and I loved being allowed to have a seat at the table. It was terrifying at times, but my mentor said, just be at the table because you're going to hear something come up that is going to be the wrong answer, and you should
Mhm.
speak up at that moment.
Right.
You don't need to understand all of the engineering, but
Right.
you are going to understand the end user. And when they stray from that, step in.
Sure.
He said it's not a seat at the table, play in the sandbox with them,
Right. Right.
is how he said. Like,
Your
get
your
in there.
information and input is just as important, Just to touch on that, I didn't even know that, what you had done, which I'm glad you're telling the story because I think it's really important. I deal with people and they always come looking for solutions and, what you were saying with the voice, like I can't, I have a user or they can't articulate like you and I. So we have an Alexa at home or a Google Home or a Nest
Hmm.
and it doesn't understand it. And some of the workarounds that we did back then was, have somebody record their voice
Yeah.
onto a low-tech communicator and allow them access with a switch. But that's it's kind of
Limiting.
counterintuitive because it's like they can speak, but they
Yeah.
don't speak as well as you are. They don't articulate the same. And there's so much technology out there. Like people don't realize what's all right. The device itself doesn't have all the tech. It's a portal for these
Hmm.
massive servers, but it's the end client to allow you to have access. So now they're making these products for the mass public, which I understand they're a business. They're appealing to the most majority of the people that are going to buy it. But there are so many people in this world, unfortunately, that have some level of disability, and they're not always thought of. So it's great that you were involved in this project and to help. It's like, why can't you harness that power for somebody else? And it's definitely so empowering. And we all have a phone that can
Hmm.
translate and talk, and it can do so many things, automated things in the home, and all these great things. It's great that it's now becoming accessible, inclusive. getting it accessible to everybody, which that's the way it should be.
There's a long way to go. I mean,
Oh,
but
sure.
the work was at least letting people know how inaccessible these platforms are. To poke holes in the reality that exists in a lot of these tech sectors of not being inclusive.
Hmm.
The final step is legislation that is in Congress to make platforms like video conference calls, Zoom, Google Meets, accessible to people that have non-standard speech. So reach out to us at the Babel Group if you want to support getting on. We have a petition, but we're also looking for Republican support
Okay.
to get this bipartisan. Ed Markey in Massachusetts is on board with this. He's been part of communication, accessibility, and inclusion work his whole career. So it's not mandated that any of this voice technology is accessible at all right
Right.
now.
Right.
Uh, so it's not always being prioritized, in my opinion.
Yeah.
When they have to make something accessible to people with low vision issues or motor issues and cognitive issues, but speech
Mhm.
is not always part of the equation.
Right.
So the only product right now that is on the market that anyone can go to is Voice It, and it is the founding product at the Babel Group. It is why we started the Babel Group, was to support and get behind accessible speech recognition currently with a product called Voice It.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's great. I know that they do some mandates with websites for accessibility, but it's great that you're doing this. And we'll put anything that's important, we'll put in the show notes for people to look at after on their own time. But there's a gentleman that I'm hoping to have on my podcast. He was an Olympic swimmer in Britain, Ben Clark, and he sustained an injury and he became a paraplegic. So he started a fitness company. He's like, how many gyms they have? Maybe they have wheelchair accessibility to get up with a ramp, but are the machines accessible? Just because somebody's disabled doesn't mean they don't want to work out and don't want to be, you're cutting off some of your clients, just like with all these tech devices. It's like you're not serving everyone. So
No, I think that's a really good point.
his message is to basically try and get inclusive. Like, is your gym really inclusive? Like, make these things accessible to everyone so that they could come and use the facility, not just, have a wheelchair. Or a wheelchair bathroom. Okay, that's great, but I can't use the gym equipment or
It's
have some
interesting. It's
equipment. Yeah.
and I don't think that scenario is done intentionally
No.
ever. One of the customers that uses Voice It said that he went into a large department store and couldn't access their bathrooms because although they had the buttons to access the building, they didn't have the
Right.
buttons to access the bathroom.
The bathroom.
So
Yeah.
he couldn't actually get the door open, and he went and told them, and they actually called him back and say, we have now installed those if you would like to come back in. They didn't know.
Right. It's the lack
So
of knowledge. I don't, like you
yeah.
said, I don't think anybody's doing this intentionally unless you have somebody that makes the decisions or calls the shots that maybe have a family member and say, hey,
Hmm.
or if they've gone to a store with them or they've gone somewhere and struggled to get in a building or to use stuff, then, it's just not talked about and it needs to be, it needs
Yeah.
to be.
The checklists that I'm sure the fire department has to go through. I don't know how it works, but we all just have to be advocates in the end.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, with things like doing this podcast and having people with a voice and reaching out to your you know, your your constituents and Congress people and your local representatives and just say, hey, can you look into this? Or, we want to see some changes. Nobody's expecting it to happen overnight, but if you don't say anything, nothing's going to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So right now, Voice It does have an integration into Zoom, which is great. I just had a call earlier with somebody that's continuing to run their business, and they had a business call later today that was going to be their first Voice It Zoom call. And it's also a Chrome extension. So it's really currently the only thing on the market that allows people to join virtually and have an inclusive caption
Hmm.
experience with their unique speech. or to dictate in the classroom. So certainly come and visit us. We have a Voice It webpage on thebabelgroup.com. You can sign up there. Clinicians can sign up and get an evaluator's account. And then anybody that wants to test it gets a 30-day trial. If you need an extension on that, we're very reasonable. We
Right.
can give extensions. Sometimes a
Right.
vacation happens or someone gets ill or funding
Right.
is still being figured out. So
Right.
take it for a spin and just
And
see how it works.
what platforms is it running on? It runs on Windows, Mac, I'm assuming.
That's the interesting thing. So it is a web-based application.
Okay.
So it is once somebody signs in, they can sign in on their computer, on their phone, and on their tablet, and use Voice It anywhere. I even say sometimes to moms, like put it on your phone, and it's an aid for the listener to have
Hmm.
access to if you want to have it on your para's mobile device or your mom's or your sister's. It can be logged in anywhere.
Wow.
Because of that, it does require internet. Voice It
Okay.
still requires cloud resources
Okay.
to have speech recognition.
For the most part, I don't think we exist today without internet access. But that's great because it's cross-platform. I mean, if somebody like I know in the United States we're lucky we can have Mac and Windows based, but in Europe, Windows is not always is expensive. Some of the devices people run Linux. I'm a Linux
Yeah.
fan, so because it's web-based, I can run it on Linux if I want, or anything that has a browser. I'm assuming. Now,
Yep.
are you outside of the United States right now, or is this strictly stuff in the U.S.? That's what I was going to ask.
The Babel Group is an international company, but we sell to the US and Canada. And the Voice It as a product is international.
Okay.
SuperU is a group in Australia. Adapt IT is out of the UK. So it does have support only in English at this time.
Right.
Again, when it came to like collecting all of the data, we started with English. That's where the most robust sort of base platforms are for people like you and me.
Hmm.
So that's where the initial research started. But now data collection is happening for other languages. You have to have that data collection of non-standard
Right.
speech to get started.
Sure. So it's a work in progress on
It's a
that
work in
front.
progress. Hopefully
Yeah.
soon we'll have more than just English.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think with the AI assistance of help, it'll create a database, maybe generate this stuff faster. So we're almost out of time. So I think I want to wrap it up at this. Katie, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast and you told me a lot of information that I didn't even know existed, and I'm glad. So, I mean, I've been around for 24 years. I still didn't know all about that. So it's good because the other people will get to benefit from this. And again, we'll put all the links and anything pertinent in the show notes below. So again, I want to thank Katie from the Babel Group for being on. And next, one of the next podcasts, her co-founder Rachel will be on. So we'll speak a little more about this because it's a very interesting topic. And I had said earlier the company I work for, Enabling Devices, they're very supportive of what I'm doing on my own. But as an incentive or a gift to my listeners and viewers, Enabling Devices is giving me an exclusive 10% one-time only purchase coupon code, which would be AT Today 26. That will also be included in the show notes below. So if you do want to check out Enabling Devices and visit the website, if you want to buy something, save yourself 10%. And it does definitely help support the channel to continue spreading the word and, giving people the information, as they always say, knowledge is power. So with that said, again, Katie, thanks for being on the podcast. I really enjoyed our time. I hope the viewers and listeners enjoyed the podcast and all the information that Katie has been gracious enough to share with us. So until next time, this has been Assistive Technology Today Podcast. Your host, Vinny Lavodi. See you on the next podcast. Katie,
Thank you.
thanks again.
Thank you, Vinny. This has been great. And I'm glad that Rachel's here next week. She'll be able to do a
Yep.
deep dive into
Yeah.
more of this with you.
Yeah, that'll be another interesting podcast. So I'm looking forward to speaking with her.
Amazing. Thank you.
All right. Take care now.